see the symphony there, and also we had a great meal at a Russian restaurant.
Yeah.
With some nice frozen stoli from right across the border. And unfortunately, I don't remember what happened at the concert. Do you? Were you there?
Yeah. No, I was in Finland.
That was my favorite tour, by the way. The '88 tour by far was. I thought it was the most fun for me. For a number of reasons. It was the first time we actually carried or the only tour that I did that we actually carried a full horn section.
Yeah.
With great players, as all the players always were. But it was also the first time that I was the primary keyboard player, so that was a lot of fun for me and very challenging. I mean, I don't have the chops of a Tommy Mars. Not many people do, but I'm no slouch. I mean, you don't get into Frank's band if you can't really play. But my primary function as a keyboard player, I think, was I have a feel, especially for the old R&B stuff that Frank loved so much. And I could play all the parts, all the technical, all the demanding parts. I could play those things. That was not a problem.
And you could play also Bartok.
Yeah. I remember that. Yeah, that was fun. But it was interesting because in the previous tours, being a multi-instrumentalist was really, I think, one of the reasons that Frank liked me in the band. I could do a lot of different things. I wasn't really ever the guy to rely on for this blazing keyboard solo or anything, but I could, among other things, I could play the keyboards. So it was a big challenge for me to be the primary keyboard player in that tour, and I really enjoyed that.
Okay, let me check that this machine is working.
Oh.
So how did you become a multi-instrumentalist?
I just, well, first of all, my parents were opera singers. They had the opposite lead roles in Gilbert and Sullivan's Mikado, a light opera, not a real, like a Wagnerian heavy opera at all. But so my background, and I grew up in Philadelphia in the 50s. So there in Philadelphia, aside from the classical background from my parents, they were also into lots of other kinds of music. My dad was into big band swing, and so I heard all that kind of stuff. American Bandstand was there in the 50s with Dick Clark. I actually started watching Bandstand before Dick Clark was on. Not many people know there was anybody before Dick Clark, but it was called Bob Horn's American Bandstand. And there was always a lot of great jazz there. Coltrane was there for a while, and great players passed through there to play at the clubs. And the Philadelphia Orchestra has always been one of the best in the world. I studied at the Curtis Institute with many of the principal players in the orchestra, and played under Eugene Ormandy every week, or whoever was in town guest conducting the Philadelphia Orchestra. So week after week I was playing under the greatest conductors in the world. That was as a French horn player. That was my main, in terms of studying a classical instrument, that was what I did. The piano actually was the first thing. As soon as I could reach up and reach the keys, I started to mess around with it. But I was always hearing all different kinds of things. The first piece of music I remember hearing, identifying and asking for was Stravinsky's Firebird. I used to ask my mom to play the Firebird. I loved that piece of music. And I responded to all different kinds of instruments, and I liked the sound of many different things, and I never really felt a powerful urge to just focus on one thing. I just liked all of music, all that I heard. So the piano came first. I mean, we had a piano at home, and so that was the obvious thing to gravitate to first. I studied very briefly. I hated piano lessons. At the time I started, I was just about turning 8 years old, and that's when that's when baseball started too, and I was much more into baseball. I'd look out the window and I'd see my buddies playing, and I didn't want to play these scales. I wanted to get out there. In fact, I was almost a professional baseball player. That was another career possibility, but I decided not to do that. So the next thing I picked up was a little plastic flute. My brother and sister and I all played these little plastic flutes, and then when I was in 4th grade, I started with the French horn. In 3rd grade, in the public school system in Pennsylvania at that time, which was a very good system then, things have changed quite a bit. They gave us, all of us kids, music tests to see who had aptitude for music and who wanted to be in the band and all. And I was the only kid they ever had that as a 3rd grader scored a perfect result on the music test. So they said, give this kid a French horn. So in 4th grade, they gave me a French horn, and I started to play it and did quite well with it, and went on to Curtis eventually with that. But then when I was about 13, I finally got a chance to do something that I'd wanted to do for years, because when I was very much into R&B also from an early age. The first thing I started to do on the piano was to play blues just by ear, just by listening and saying, oh, I understand what that is, and reproducing that. But when I heard Ray Charles, I was just blown away. And he had a tenor sax player named David Fathead Newman, and man, when I heard Fathead, I said, I got to make that sound. I got to do that. But I was already playing French horn, and the band leader there in elementary school just didn't want to have any part of giving me anything else, because French horn players are real hard to find. But finally, then when I got to junior high, which in the American school system at that time, it was grades kindergarten through 6 is elementary, 7 through 9 is junior high, 10 through 12 is senior high. When I got to 7th grade, junior high, the band leader there, the band instructor, was a sax player. He used to play big band things, and he was also very reluctant, but because he was a sax player, he finally broke down and gave me one. So the summer that I turned 13, which was the summer of 8th grade, I finally prevailed upon him to give me a saxophone. And he gave me a saxophone, an alto, which I hated. I didn't like alto. I wanted tenor. But all he had was an alto. So he gave me an alto, and he gave me a book. So in a couple of weeks, I taught myself all the scales and how to work the thing. And that fall, I came back and I said, look, I got to have a tenor. So he gave me a tenor, and I started to play lead tenor in the dance band after only playing for a few months, because I just loved it, and I was playing it all the time. And actually, soon thereafter, I started to play professionally too. When I was 13, I first started to play saxophone in bars, because I looked a lot older. People thought I was 18, even though I was only 13, because I had this big hair, like 50s kind of. Early 60s hair, and so I started playing in bars with some pretty terrible bands, but I was out there doing it, and it was fun. So then in junior high, I started to pick up all the reed instruments. Actually, when I was in elementary school, I used to kids would sometimes, the bad kids would cut classes. What I would do is I would cut recess. When everybody else was outside playing, I would sneak into the band room and pull out, trombones and baritone horns and teach myself to play these things. So by the time I got out of elementary school, I could play all the brass instruments. And by the time I got out of junior high, I had included the reed instruments and flute, and which I liked also. I got myself a flute. Because I liked Roland Kirk. I liked the things he did on flute, and some other players as well. So those became the main things by that time. I'd pretty much narrowed it down to 4: the keyboards, the saxophone, the French horn, and the flute. And all the while, I was singing as well, but that was never really a main focus. Everybody was so impressed with the fact that I could play all these things and really play them well. Like when I picked up the saxophone, I was the best saxophone player. When I picked up the horn, I was the best horn player. And finally, that got to a point where that wasn't happening anymore, and kids who specialized finally got to where they could play better than me on any one instrument, except French horn. Nobody could play better French horn.